All right. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining us. This is our second weekly community SIP call. If you were on last week's call, you know that we had a pretty lively discussion about all of the mining discussion that's happened on the forum recently. And we also touched a little bit on all the improvements that we're going to be making to the SIP process to make it more inclusive and more accessible to the wider Stacks community. So on today's call, we're actually going to go into that, into the SIPS process and all the ways that you can get involved in a little more detail. So I'm joined by Hero, who all of you may or may not be familiar with. He's been heavily involved in the SIPS process as a community member and is a candidate to become a SIP resident. And he's actually going to help us lead the discussion on the SIPS process, what a SIP is, how the SIP process works, how you can get involved today. So we'll start the call with that, and we'll leave a little bit of time for questions as always. And we're also joined today by Mike, who will be talking about SIPs 13 and 18, which have moved to accepted status. And he's going to talk about what those entail and what you'll be able to do once and if they're activated. Any questions before we get started? No? All right. In that case, I'm going to turn it over to Hero if you want to start sharing your screen, Hero.
Okay, let me give it a try. Oh, there's so many windows. Sorry, it's asking me for permission to share. It's my first time sharing, I think that's why.
1 second. Jude, are you able to grant permission? Oh,
I think it's my laptop. It needs my permission for whatever reason.
okay. You should be able to share. Let me know if you're having issues, Hero, and as a last resort, I can share your presentation as well.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, I think Hero is left and is going to try to rejoin. Okay, there he is. Hey, Hero. Are you able to share?
I'm very sorry. Yeah, let me try again. It asked me to quit. So yeah, okay, I got it.
Great.
Okay, can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Okay, thanks guys for coming, and hope you can hear me okay. So yeah, I'm here to explain a little bit about the SIP and also get into hope to be a candidate for this SIP residency. So SIP, what is a SIP? So SIP stands for Stacks Improvement Proposal. So it's simply a formal document to help people to have a guide to add any features and processes to Stacks network. And it's really important because we're adding things to the core blockchain, you know, whether it's a technical stuff or whether it's informational stuff. But the technical stuff is super important. Like, you know, it can touch on emissions, it can touch the code base, adding features to mining, decentralization of mining and stuff like that. So it's a document to guide through that process. And if you were here around last year in November, you would have known that SIP 12 was passed. So that particular SIP, for example, touched on the costs of transactions. And before SIP 12, I think the estimation for computation and stuff was quite conservative. So SIP 12 allows a less conservative estimation. Therefore, the end result is all the users have lower gas fees. So I think that was a benefit from that we see every day, and so much cheaper. I remember like sending transaction like was 1 stacks or 5 stacks, but now it's like sub 0.1 stacks. So yeah, so it's just a document to guide us. But how does it work? Like you need some sort of process to take it from the idea to the end ratified stage. And it goes from draft to ratified. But before draft, you need like discussions, you need people posting ideas, you need like gathering of different people's consensus, and you need to have people on board liking your stuff, ideally. So once that gets into a draft, the SIP, it will get to reviewed by different, developers, coders, people working Stacks Foundation, people working Hero. Actually, you can comment on anything. If you don't have to be working for Foundation or Hero, but yes. So it gets from draft to we're building out the process of adding SIP editors, adding consideration advisory board, and that will help give perspective on governance, diversity, so it touches on more than just technical stuff. So the social side, the ethical side of things. Yeah, and then it will get reviewed by more technical people like Jude and Aaron and various people like that. And then it will get voted on at the end. And then when the vote passes, that's what happened last time, we voted. And then if you have the 2/3 of the majority, if you're more than 2/3 of the votes, then it becomes ratified and then gets included in the next upgrade. So that's sort of the general review process, the vetting process. Yeah, I mean, we don't have everything figured out, and we are still improving on everything. So things like the consideration advisory board and SIP editors, that's where I hope to add and contribute to formalize some of the processes or improve some of the processes. So a bit of fun fact. So where did the SIP come from? Like what happened? So basically, it needs to be created by somebody. So it was Jude, Dr. Jude, and Ken who wrote the SIP 000 process that basically outlines all the processes that would happen from idea to the end product. So they've written a extremely detailed document and is on GitHub, and I'll share the link. But yeah, that document is amazing, and that process is actually inspired by various protocol development, and such as Python, Bitcoin, Ethereum. Interestingly, the Bitcoin that's the Bitcoin improvement process, is actually draws from Internet Engineering Task Force, which is the foundation of Internet protocol development. So dates back to the 80s and 90s. So actually, the SIP process has a long history and is well trialed and tested. And we and Jude, the smart guys took on the effort to develop a very thorough process, and then so it became the SIP today, the process SIP. So what do we have right now in SIP pipeline? So we have 4 SIPs currently. Some of it accepted, some of it activation in progress. I'll let Mike and Marvin to go into details of those SIPs. But yeah, so lots of work are actively happening. People are doing like commits and stuff on GitHub. So it's lots of work have been done. So why should you care about the SIPs? And some of the reason I'd like to let you know is that these processes are very important because we need to have a robust system for growth, and it actually impacts everybody. It's not just like NFT projects and you launch it and then anything happened. It doesn't affect the network critically. This SIP process and the SIP standard affects everything the builders do, miners do. It's really affecting the core of Stacks blockchain. And we want to maintain that and vet it really thoroughly. And you want to minimize the bugs. You want to be inclusive in the way we go through that process. And it's really important to have everybody's voice heard. It's your network. Like, you are a stakeholder in Stacks if you own Stacks. If you're a miner, you're a wallet provider, everybody's a stakeholder, and everybody should have their say in how Stacks move forward. And I think it's really important that it's also something nice that you can make your mark in Stacks and Bitcoin history and set the culture for others, the inclusivity, the collective social consensus, and the contribution to the network. We want to make it as inclusive as possible. So yeah, various people have touched on what kind of stakeholders there are. So node runners, exchanges, wallet providers, payment processors, users, individuals, and investors. Everybody's a stakeholder in the Stacks blockchain, and everybody has a say in the improvement. And yeah, we all want Stacks to succeed. And one of the ways we can help is by being an active participant in the conversations and checking codes if you know how to and stuff like that. Or as a user, tell us what you want and stuff like that. What are your top concerns? What are your top priorities? Yeah. So what will I do? I think I would like to do. I would like to help. Is I like to facilitate the contributors and add improvement to the process. I think the process, we are only 1 year in, so lots of processes have been tested. I like to help broaden that out, adding more people into the process, getting more community involvement, participation of ideas, and yeah, just more community involvement, more ideas, how to narrow those ideas, funneling those ideas, so we can we can have more involvement, more inclusivity, more people's voice getting heard. So yeah, I'm very passionate about the community, as I'm very deep down in the community. So I love everybody to participate. So hopefully my residency will have form SIP. I'll help people form SIP. I will formalize some of the funneling process from the community and ideas, from brainstorming to requests for comments to draft SIPs, and streamlining the process essentially, and track the health of SIP process and create some educational content about the SIPs. and maybe touch on some of the SIP activation procedures, which are the later stage, the voting process in the SIP process as well. So who am I? So I'm Hero. I think some of you may know me. I'm quite active in the community, Stacks Discord. I'm like always there, hang out there a lot. And I'm in Alex, community manager, very active in Stacks Advocates, very passionate Bitcoiner and stackers, quite active on GitHub. From a non-technical perspective, I tried out, and just very deep in the community side. So I hope to get all my friends involved in the community. So how can you get involved? So you could, currently you already can contribute by posting ideas, posting comments on Stacks forum or Twitter even, but there's probably forum is more organized. You can post on GitHubs. You can join one of the CAPs, the consideration advisory boards, which will review some of the SIPs, and only when they get turned into recommended, then more people will review the stuff. We are in the process of building out more stuff, like SIP editors, test code mentors, writers, and etc. So those are sort of things that I'd like to think about in the next year, something like that. So thank you. That's me. You can contact Jenny, me, or anybody to get involved. And this is everybody's blockchain. So yeah, I hope everybody can participate and stuff like that. So if you want to leave a comment on my candidacy, there's a GitHub link. Yeah, that's it. I'll leave questions, maybe. I don't know. Anybody about the good questions?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for that wonderfully thorough presentation. And thank you for all the work that you do just rallying people around the SIP process. I just want to emphasize a couple of things that Hero has said. This is everyone's network. This is everyone's blockchain. And that's why the SIPs process is so important to encouraging the involvement of all the different stakeholders in Stacks. And we recognize that the SIPs process, while it is very thorough and rigorous, can sometimes be fairly intimidating or daunting, or it can feel really long. So part of our plan to improve it includes a SIP resident. So someone like Hero, hopefully Hero, who can help rally other community members around different ideas and encourage folks in the community to go for actually authoring SIPs. I know that SIPs in existence look really long and technical, but in this process, we're hoping to offer mentorship. We're hoping to offer more friendly spaces for people to brainstorm ideas, and not just think that their ideas have to be highly technical or very dense. As you all know, SIPs can also be community-oriented SIPs. They can be non-technical. Anything that has anything to do with the processes for governing the Stacks network are all welcome as far as SIPs are concerned. So I just wanted to emphasize that. I'm sure there are some questions, and we've also got Jude here. Jude, is there anything that you wanted to double click on or raise from the presentation that Hero gave?
No, I thought it was great. I thought it was a great introduction and overview of how the SIP process works.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to raise is Hero also mentioned that this is still a work in progress. It is very much a thorough process, as I mentioned, but if you've read Jude's recent forum post on scaling up the SIPs process, there are still some things that are not explicitly stated in SIP 000, such as the community pre-approval process, or what we're calling a funneling or prioritization process. So things like that, making sure that we are prioritizing the right SIPs at the right time. We're still working on what stage that would happen and including that in the SIPS process itself. So if you've got more detailed questions around that, just know that we might not have explicit answers yet, but you can also be part of the process for making those changes concrete. But all right, any questions on the SIPS process or what a SIP is or anything in the presentation that Hero provided? All right, well, if not, Hero, is there anything that you wanted to revisit before we moved on?
No, just no, thanks for coming, and yeah, no, just I definitely love to see more community people joining this movement in improving this network for everybody.
Got it. All right, yeah, and at the end, we can provide a little more information, or off of this call, we can provide more information on the ways you can get involved. Here mentioned becoming a SIP editor, as well as joining consideration advisory boards. We can provide more information to everybody after this, but for now, I want to give the floor to Mike, who is going to be talking about SIPs 13 and 18. So, Mike, do you have any slides to share, or will you just be speaking?
Hi all, nice to be here. And thanks for that, Hero. That's really interesting to hear that presentation. I haven't really got a presentation, Jenny. I don't think Marvin's here, is he? Marvin was going to go through the current state of the SIPs in progress, but I'll pick that up.
Okay.
Yeah, can I share my screen? I'll just share the board so we can see.
You should be able to.
Yeah, just doing it now. Can you see SIP 18? Or can you see a load of code?
You can see SIP 18.
Great. Sharing the right screen. Yeah, I just wanted to pick up on what Hero's saying and also kind of note like what a lot of work this must be for you, Jude, in terms of like keeping on top of all of this and the amount. It's clear the amount of effort and time that you probably spend in this process. And I think that's kind of broadening as well, isn't it, in the background? How that's working. I think I remember hearing that maybe Aaron's joining your technical cab.
He already's joined.
Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Yeah. So I was just looking through this, and so one of the things I just noticed is looking at 19. You can see the activation criteria is in the SIP. And I was just picking up, and I was going to talk about 13, which is the semi-fungible token standard. And we don't actually have the activation criteria in the SIP yet, so I think that's something that needs to be added. Is that correct? So I think I need to pick that up with Marvin.
Yep.
The last I understood, it was kind of still being decided what the activation criteria should be, and we're trying to think of something a bit more creative than just the number of implementations of it. But as far as I know, SIP 13 has been adopted. We've built a reference implementation of a marketplace using SIP 13. I think Alex or another major project has picked up SIP 13. I think it was Chan at Alex. I think similarly for signed structured data, Hero picked this up and have put the implementation into their wallet. I think Marvin was just sorting out some last minute technical issues with them about this, which have been picked up now. And likewise, the activation criteria isn't actually in here, so that's something that needs to be done. Yeah.
Right.
So,
Mike, mind giving just like an overview of both, just a quick summary of what 13 will do or what people will be able to do with it?
Sure. Yeah, I kind of assume that everybody knows now, but obviously that's just when you're kind of in your own bubble. So basically, SIP 13 is a standard for. It's a bit like the if you're familiar with the Ethereum standards, it's kind of the equivalent of EIP 1155, which is basically introduces semi-fungible tokens into the mix. So you have like things like SIP 009, which is things unique things in the world. You have SIP 10, which is fungible assets or things that are non-unique can be interchanged. SIP3 kind of builds a model where you can have a thing and a quantity of a thing. So you can get some more interesting real world use cases with SIP30. So that's pretty cool. I think a lot of the marketplaces on Ethereum migrated to 1155. I'm not an expert, but I believe that's kind of what happened, because 1155 became much more efficient gas-wise than their what was it, 721 and their equivalent standards for non-fungible and fungible tokens. So that's SIP13. Does anybody have any questions before I move on?
Maybe some use cases, maybe any?
Yeah, there's actually quite a nice blog post about this that I wrote, so I should actually know where the link to it is. I'll dig that out and drop it in the comments in a second when I finish talking. Yeah. So there is actually a blog post about this, so we could refer to that. Marvin has also written an excellent document that goes with this, which I'll post as well alongside.
I think one of the examples you'd given when we talked about it, Mike, was like in games, different.
Oh yeah, sure.
You can have a limited number of in like a.
Yeah, like so the standard originated on Ethereum by a company called Engine, which was a blockchain gaming company. And basically they used it to say, you know, if you've got a certain type number of things in a game, swords, magic wands, etc., then they're like the NFTs. But they also wanted to describe the numbers of those things in the game, because you might have 500 swords and 1,000 wands. So that was kind of the canonical example of where it can be used. It's much more generic than that. So like ticketing would be another example of a domain where you could use SIP13. Issuing different types of tickets would be the NFT, and the number of each tickets would be the fungible part. And then obviously you can build applications, marketplaces, for example, where you can buy and trade tickets for events.
I see
18,
Jamil's comments actually about, Jamil, do you want to talk to semi-fungible tokens a little bit?
Yeah, sure. Sorry, I'm out right now if there's some background noise, but I do think there are a ton of use cases for semi-fungible tokens, and we already see a lot of collections on stacks where it could be super useful, whether it comes from ticketing or collectibles like Monkey Coin, where there are duplicates basically of each item, or you have a collection with some unique items, but multiple of those unique items. So I definitely want to support these more deeply on Gamma. And I think it'll open up a ton of new use cases too, that are more utility based and different from the existing collections that we have now as well.
Thanks, Jamil. Yeah, and then SIP18 is for signed structured data. So again, this is equivalent to a SIP on the Ethereum blockchain, which allows the user to get like a message signed by the wallet, by MetaMask or whatever. And this has got a ton of use cases. One example of that is in the project we're working on at the moment. We're looking at using signed structured messages for signing votes. So if you have a DAO and you want to let people vote off chain, you can let them sign their vote with a private key using the Hero wallet, say, and then that can be broadcast as a batch of votes. So you can do kind of off-chain voting in that sense. But there's many use cases for this. I think Frigga, you're probably an expert on this. I've seen some other issues touching on this subject from you. Is there anybody who wants to say anything else about this one?
Not this specifically, Mike, but so both of these have been moved to accepted status, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're just and so the next step is activation criteria.
Yeah. So SIP18 is actually activation in progress.
Okay.
And 13 is still accepted. But I think 13 has moved to activation in progress.
Got it. Hero or Jude, do you want to elaborate on what activation criteria entail?
Sure. So every SIP has a section called the activation section. And what the activation section describes is a falsifiable procedure by which the SIP can be determined to have met the community's approval to the point where it can now be considered a ratified standard. Each SIP can have its own activation sections, its own activation criteria, because it really is specific to the body of a SIP. For systems like SIP 13 and SIP 18, the activation criteria might be a little bit less stringent than something like SIP 12, because the act of adding a new standard, for example, has fewer side effects than the act of doing a hard fork, generally speaking. So for SIPs like SIP 13 and SIP 18, like the way we had done this in the past for systems like SIP 9 and SIP 10, for example, is we would just say like, hey, okay, you have a trait, the trait's deployed, and within the next year or whatever, maybe you have 5 separate contracts implemented, and that's sufficient. SIP 18 might be a little bit more stringent, because it depends on stuff that's coming in the upcoming 2.1 release, which will be a breaking change. So one of its activation criteria are SACS 2.1 goes live, because it's blocked on it. As to like who picks these criteria, usually the SIP author proposes them, and as long as it's okay by the cabs that sign off on it in the steering committee, then it's generally fine. Like I said, each SIP is allowed to have its own activation criteria. Generally, the criteria are stricter if the impact of the proposed change is bigger, is the rule of thumb here.
Thanks, Jude.
Thanks, Jude.
I see that Werner, you have a question? Oh, there it is. You put it in the chat. If you wanted to talk about it a little more. So
Sure,
Werner,
sure.
yeah, go ahead.
I was wondering if it actually came up when I was talking about this with Hero, and I was wondering if the SIP 18 can be used to also vote, if it would have additional benefits, make it easier to vote, for example, for a hard fork or upgrade. Maybe we can try that when we do the voting for stacks 2.1.
Yeah, certainly. It's just that we need a 2 consensus buff. Oh, I'm sorry, you mean voting off chain, right?
Right.
Yeah, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. As long as we can tie each signature back to whatever it is we're using to weight or measure the votes, such as like in SIP 12, we used number of tokens you have stacked in the past 2 reward cycles as your vote weight. We were thinking of doing something similar for 2.1 in the absence of something better, but down the road, they could do something like, maybe there's like a KYC process where you prove you're an individual, and as long as you can show that you own, I don't know, like an NFT that represents that proof of individuality, that would count as 1 vote. But yeah, to high level point, like once you have this canonical way of representing signed structured data, if you can represent it in Clarity, then you can sign it with your keys, and you don't have to send a transaction. You can just post the signed payload like as a GitHub issue, or on a mailing list, or on Twitter, or anywhere we can find it, really.
Just to add to that, Jude, one of the things Marvin and I have been talking about is using like a version of Executor DAO for that kind of voting. So you could imagine having a vote as one of the activation criteria for a SIP.
Yeah, certainly.
Yeah. Cool.
All right, any other questions on either SIP 13 or SIP 18? Okay, great. All right, so this was a great example of the way that a SIP call would normally go. This is supposed to be a space for existing SIP authors or potential SIP authors to come and discuss their ideas, ask the community if there are any questions. So beyond having a presentation for a current SIP, if you have an idea for a SIP, this is a great place to air that out and get feedback from others too. So if there's any of that, feel free to take some time to discuss or ask questions on whether your idea is viable. Otherwise, we don't always have to use the whole hour. This is a space for discussion and for community feedback. So obviously a work in progress. If you have any feedback on how we can improve these calls, we're also open to that too. But Mike, unless there's anything else you want to say about SIP 13 and 18, I can open it up to other SIP ideas or questions.
No, I'm just looking for the blog post so I can drop the link in.
Okay. And anyone else on the call, are there SIP ideas that you've been noodling on that you want to propose to the community?
I think what could be helpful maybe in the future, maybe I can try and do is maybe I can give some example of ideas, because maybe sometimes if we just ask people for a very open-ended, and maybe without some example, maybe it's harder for them to formalize in their head. And
Yeah,
maybe
great point.
we can offer some examples and yeah, just to get them started thinking.
Yeah, that's a great point and great idea, Hero. Yeah, so for now, I mean, as you're thinking, you all know that the forum is a great place to post discussion, post ideas, as well as Twitter. We encourage the forum because it's a great place for asynchronous discussion. So with this process moving forward, we're going to have our SIP president spend a lot more time in the forum, making sure that people feel heard and people feel like their ideas are worthy of going through the SIP process. So from now on, we definitely encourage you to spend some time there. Also in Discord, I think that we will have a channel for this kind of discussion as well. So any other places that you want to see a space for SIP discussion specifically, let us know and we'll make that happen. I see Juliet's question. Yeah, we can. There, as you know, there aren't a ton of SIPs coming in all the time. So this one we notified everyone of last week on last week's call, as well as on Twitter ahead of time. So SIPs 13 and 18 have been in progress for a while. You can always just check the repo to see what activity there is, but we can also let everyone know in an agenda ahead of time if you need that notice. All right, if nothing else, thanks everyone, and we will see you on next week's call. If you have discussion items or agenda items for next week's call, feel free to reach out to me or Hero, and we can make sure to include that in the call next week. Great, thanks all. See you next week.
Jenny.
Awesome. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.